All right, hey, if y'all still have it for some reason and you finish, feel free to just hold it up. They'll come around to you guys to get them to you. If not, then we will go ahead and we will jump in. Again, you can use your binders if you'd like, but no need to as we start session number 6. So, as we jump in, this session is titled Engage. And it's one of those sessions that my hope for it is that it falls into that category of helpful life, transferable life, and then also very, very transferable and practical to Camp 75. I'll just be up front in saying that I'm going to move pretty quickly through kind of the content portion, the kind of life portion, to get to the Camp 75 portion. And as you can see up here, I actually invite some of you guys up here with me to talk through some things about, again, how we create an irresistible Camp 75 experience. But I think we should start at the why. We should start at why all this matters, and then jump in. So right off the bat, to get us in our direction, basically the tension that I want to start with or unpack is the idea that when life gets hard, we tend to isolate. When life gets hard, we tend to isolate. So just think about that for a second. I never want to just assume that we're all on the same page with something, but I just want you to think about that statement. And really specifically, what I'd like you to do, and not like you don't even close your eyes or anything, but just think about the last time life got hard for you. I don't know if that was yesterday. I don't know if that was last week before you got here. I don't know if it's been a couple of months, and it's been a good couple of months. But think about the last time that life got like hard for you. Not like school's right, but like hard. And I know life has been hard to some degree or another for every single one of you. And then just think about how you initially wanted to respond to that. Some of you may have continued to respond to that. A lot of times in my life, I'll share just a couple quick examples, but when life got hard for me, I have isolated, and that is how I actually responded. But even when we don't respond that way, and we respond in a different way, we typically have the desire to isolate, right? And when I say that, it just means to pull back. It means I want to show less of myself. I want to be known less by the people around me, right? I don't want to engage. It's like, it can be on a very practical level, like I just don't want to see people right now, right? Like life is hard, and I don't really want to spend time with people, or maybe I know it's good for me, but I don't want to. Or like on a bigger emotional level, it's like, I'm going to give them 10% of me right now. Like I just cannot give anyone 100% of who I am right now, right? We isolate. And so I was thinking about that idea, and I was like, man, why is it that when life is hard that we isolate? Like why don't we just like spill it all out? Why don't we just go and like spew everything? And you might say, well, I feel like I know some people that like when life gets hard, they do kind of do that. Like when life's difficult, they do just like give everything to everyone. And that may be true, but it also might be true that they're not actually giving you everything, right? They're giving you enough to get the attention for like their need for that, to affirm that, but that they're not actually giving you all of who they are. So I had that question, like, why is it that we isolate? And I came across a really interesting article titled, "We Isolate and Withdraw When Life is Hard. Why?" And I was like, well, that's pretty helpful. So I really like this answer to that question. Here's what they said. A simple reason is that isolating ourselves is what we perceive as avoiding risk. Things are so bad, we believe, that we don't want to risk anything that can make our situations worse. Continued on to say, it is a fact in our minds that revealing how we feel or revealing the circumstances that led us to feel how we do to someone is an action that can ruin us and put us into an unknown or an uncertain territory. It would rob us of control in a time where we don't have control over anything. Right? So again, think back to that time where life got hard. Would you say that life being hard, like what does that even feel like? It kind of can feel like a loss of control, right? It can feel like there are circumstances that I'm currently in that are out of my control, and that's part of why it feels so hard. If we're in a situation where we know exactly what to do next and we have the 7-step plan, it's like, that's not that hard. But when we're in a place where like, I have 0 options or I have 100, but all of them just aren't that good, right? It feels like we don't have control. And so we tend to pull back to avoid the risk. Because every single move or decision or putting ourselves out there, whatever it is that we do, that is a risk. We're taking a risk and exposing ourselves, right? And I'm talking kind of ambiguously right now, but we're exposing ourselves like emotionally to people, right? It's like we're taking a risk and again, going back to yesterday, and trusting them in those moments as well. I think what isolating can look like is some of these things. One can be just ignoring and walking away. This is something that I did early on in my life. One of the first kind of big hard thing in my life was when my parents separated in late elementary, early middle school. And I shared this before. I didn't tell my best friend for 6 months right? So every time, he came over 4 times a week, too. Like, we like basketball every single day. He'd ask where my dad was, and I was like, we just playing. I was like, oh, he's on a work trip, right? And on the weekends, I'd say he was golfing. Like, I couldn't say it, right? I'd go home and I'd go in my room, be super upset, but like, I couldn't get it out to him. I've unpacked that a lot now in counseling and things like that, and I just didn't want to be that kid with divorced parents. And I learned that I wasn't that kid with divorced parents, that statistically over 50% were. And there were a lot of other things at play, but I pulled back from my closest friend and certainly from everyone else. So that's something that can look like is just like I just want to pretend that it doesn't exist, right? I'm going to compartmentalize is like a word. If that compartmentalizing means I'm going to live my life over here and pretend like this part of my life like doesn't exist, or it exists in like a different time. So I'm going to be this way when I go to school, and then I'm going to go to basketball, and I'm going to be this way on the basketball team, and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to act like this, and I'm going to feel these emotions when I'm there, right? And we compartmentalize, and some people would say like that's a skill or a life skill. I think at times as a leader, it can be helpful to be able to gauge the energy in the room, but from an emotional health standpoint, that is not helpful, right? To pretend like your emotional health is different in different parts of your life because you are the same person in all of those areas. But we can ignore and walk away. We can also hope someone else will ... Right? We can hope someone else will take care of it, right? If there's a situation, maybe it's a fight with someone, that was a fight that got big, that like that's where life got hard for you, or again, something, it was the news that you just never wanted to hear. It's like, man, I hope someone else will just go and take care of that for me. We kind of like push it aside and be like, I bet they'll get to that. And then lastly, what isolating looks like in the last one is your appearance over their needs. And this one might not make sense right away, but when we talk about Camp 75 later, I think that like when life gets hard, sometimes we just want to make sure that we look good, right? We want to make sure like we've got it together. I will stand here and say that I do not have it all together, but every time I get on stage, I have a tendency to make it look like that as much as possible, and I have to rail against that. But we have a tendency to do that when we sit in our groups, when you sit in a small group in the morning, when you talk with your team. It's so valuable when you get to the point where you don't have to do that, but a lot of times we care about what we look like, what our appearance is to people, rather than going to what we actually need or what the people need around us. So a lot of times I think we isolate when life gets hard, but we have another option, which is, again, the title of this year's. I think if isolation is one response, I think engaging is the other side of that response. And so here's what engaging can look like. One of those is just to ask hard questions, asking hard questions. So sometimes it's like we know that there's a conversation to be had in a hard situation. Here at Bootcamp, like loving on you guys and hanging with you guys, sometimes there's just hard conversations, right? Conversations that make me want to just, I'd rather like just be on a beach vacation than have to have them, right? But sometimes you have to like push yourself to say, hey, what questions should I ask right now to get to the bottom of this, to really engage with someone? The second one that's going to be kind of the guiding is embracing the unknown. Embracing the unknown. And third, I'll put these together, is being comfortable being uncomfortable. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. I don't know if you guys have heard that before, but that is a massively important leadership idea and life idea. A lot of times we feel like we just need to get to a place where we're good again. We need to get to like this place of stability where like, oh, everything's good and I'm back in control. And I would push against that. I don't think that's where you need to get to. I just think you need to get to a place where we are comfortable with not being that comfortable. When life has been super hard, there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel, but it could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be next week, it could be 10 years down the road where things feel like they'll get back under control. And so part of engaging is getting to a place where we are comfortable being uncomfortable. When it comes to our Camp 75 teams, there's going to be experiences that are going to put you in a place where you're uncomfortable, and we're going to talk about how to engage those in just a few minutes, and that's how this is going to tie in. I think ultimately when we do this, when we do engage the unknown, we create the potential for something that I would call defining moments. So for just a second, if you can do this without falling asleep, I'd love for you guys to close your eyes. And what I want you to think about is I want you to think about 3 moments that you think were the most defining moments in your entire life up to this point in time. Think about each of those. Think about where you were. Think about who you were with. Think about what you were doing, what was said, why you were doing it, why what was being done was there. Think about the context of the three most defining moments of your life. When you've thought about those moments, you guys can go ahead and look up. The reason that I didn't define what a defining moment is before going into that, and that could be a dangerous or a scary question, because defining moments for some are going to be the greatest and the best moment of your life, and defining moments for others are going to be the hardest moment of your entire life. But I didn't want to give you any kind of context, because really, for the sake of this, again, to tie engagement to this, defining moments are essentially short experiences that are both meaningful and memorable, or both memorable and meaningful. And so when I think about your life, the moments that are most memorable and meaningful, potentially the hardest, but most likely I would be willing to guess that somewhere along the way, someone engaged in those moments. I would say that someone jumped into the mess, right? When life gets hard and it just gets sticky, it's like, gosh, like that shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have been that way, but here we are, right? Again, we have opportunities to isolate, but typically when we isolate, those don't become as defining as when someone engages in the midst of those moments. There's three things that can really shape a defining moment, and then I want to talk about how we can shape defining moments when we make the decision to engage. The first one is just the nature of defining moments is that they shape our lives. Like, what's so interesting about our lives, and this idea comes from this book called The Power of Moments, which just really unpacks, like, if you think about your memories, they're so weird, right? Think about the memories of your 12 to 18 years of life. Like, why do we remember what we remember? I cannot, honestly remember more than half of my meals that I've eaten over the last 6 days or 7 days. Like, I have no clue, right? That just, goes, it just happens and it goes away. But there are some moments in my life that were incredibly hard, incredibly good, that I could tell you every single person that was there, probably the conversations that we had word for word. And, the authors of this book just try to answer the question and say, well, why is that? Why can we remember this? And they came to this defining moments and the nature of these. So the first one is that. The second is that we don't have to wait to make them happen, because, number three, is we can create them. So in our lives, we can create defining moments. Sometimes they happen to us, but a lot of times they're created when we make the decision to engage. And I would say, again, setting this all up, that when we make the decision to engage in really, really hard situations. When we engage the unknown, we create the potential for defining moments in our lives and in the lives of those around us. So the last thing I want to say on kind of a macro level or a big picture or kind of a life level is that there's going to be, the only thing I can really guarantee about the next 6 months or the next year or the next 10 years for you guys is that there will be a lot of unknown, right? There will be a lot of things that are just confusing, a lot of things that you're like, I don't know what to do next. And when you're in that place, you're like, I don't know what to do next, but I know that I could close up and I could shut off and I could tell them no and I could run away and I could say that I'm just going to do this on my own. I'm good on my own. Or you have the decision to say, I'm going to invite people in with whom my marble jar is full, with who I can trust, and I'm going to walk through this with them and I'm going to go through this mess and I'm going to come out better on the other side. Every time that we engage this, we have the potential for that to become a defining moment in our life that we carry with us forever. And when it comes to Camp 75, it is just littered with the opportunity for defining moments in the life of kids and their parents as well. And so that's what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about, is how we can actually do that and how we can have defining moments. To make this a little bit more interactive, what I want to do, I'm just going to talk about some scenarios. Some I'll talk about, and then some I'll just ask you to talk about with your team. So if you came into this situation as a team, what would you do about it? And really, I'm going to unpack that. I think all of these are opportunities to engage something that's hard in a camp and then create a defining moment. So I've got 10 on here. I don't know if we'll go through, we might go through and we have a good amount of time. And then I'm going to actually invite some students up to help us continue this conversation. So we're going to go ahead and open this up to you guys and your team. This is like pretty simple, but I just want you to think about this. And the other reason we're doing this part of it is if, again, 170 are here for the first time, there might be some like, what do I do if? Like just like, what about questions? I'm not sure. And this can hopefully calm some of those fears. It can kind of be like a gauntlet session where we ask some hard questions. And we'll go through this. The first one is this. A kid is shy at camp and always sits with his mom, right? It's day 2 of camp. Kid is like super shy and he's always sitting with his mom, right? It's not a crazy hard situation, but it's also not a kid who's like really easy to be with. So what I want to do is as we go through this, I want you to talk about it. So just talk with your team like, hey, what are like the 1, 2, 3 things that we would do to engage like this kid and to love and lead them at Camp 75? And then we'll talk about them together and we'll move through these. So with that, feel free to talk with your team about this one. A kid is shy at camp and always sits with his mom. What would y'all say? There just a couple of volunteers. What are a few options when a kid is shy at camp? What could you do? Relate with them? Cool. What do you mean by that? Something you have in common? Yeah, absolutely. What else? What's an idea? Yes. Yeah. Take initiative one-on-one. Do you have something else? One or more of you? I like it. I'll take one more on this one. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I like that as well. Those are good answers. Both of those, as well as relate, those are all options to engage, right? Another option at camp, which I think I've probably done at a camp before, is just to be like, oh, he's with his mom and he's good, right? Like I would say that falls a little bit more in like the isolation category of like, we'll just hope someone else will take care of it. But if you go engage and you turn that kid's day around or that week around, like he will remember that moment for a very long time that you came over and you were individual. It doesn't have to be all 8 of you guys or 7 of you guys or 6 of you guys. I think someone said one-on-one. I think that's great to go over there and have someone engage that. But every single kid in your camp matters, and we can engage them by doing that. I like those. I like those a lot. We're going to skip number 2 and go to number 3. What if you showed up to a camp and kids didn't show up to a camp? What could you do in that situation? This has happened before, at least once, if not twice. We showed up to a host home, and they just were like, "Hey, didn't realize we needed to like invite kids," and so we thought you brought them to us as a part of the camp. If that's your camp, again, we're like 99.5% like success rate of having at least one kid there. But it did happen where it happened once. What would you do? Or what could you do? Yeah, in the back. Walk around, make a lot of noise, be fun, and attract attention. I like it. That's good. Yeah, what else could you do? Yes, back row. Yeah. If it's camp's at the park, no one's there, cool. Say that again? Door-to-door with flyers. And knock. Good. Cool. Any other creative ideas? Yes, last one. Engage with the host home. Yeah, I think all those are good. I think if you show up and they're like, didn't know, I'd be like, oh, okay, like, we'll just go find another place for the week. I think you like say, you work with them, okay, like, who do you know that has kids? Like, who lives nearby? Do you know your neighbors? Let's get on the phone, right? Maybe you go around. Maybe you do move the location. We go to a park and we say, we're going to find out if there's kids that we can love here. Camp 75 is where we love people 75 minutes at a time throughout the summer, right? So it's not like it has to be at that place or else we can't do it. So I don't know what it would be, but it's like if you showed up in a situation where you don't know what to do, you have a decision to like engage and go do stuff, or you have a decision to sit back and say, I hope someone takes care of this for me. And we're going to make the decision to make great camps and to engage those. Let's see. The next one is number 4. It says, you show up to a community engagement opportunity. It's very unclear what you're supposed to be doing. And actually, before we go with your team on this, I just want to talk about it because it might seem simple, but that's also why I talk about it because it's not as simple as it seems. So when you show up to a community engagement, sometimes what we've learned as we've grown and we've begun to do this and began to serve with 20 different organizations is we do everything we can on the front end to get as prepared as possible for you guys. But sometimes you're going to show up to a food bank or you're going to show up to a home and they're going to be like, we're so glad you're here. And they'll be confused, right? And they're like, what do you do? That could happen. Again, we do everything we can to eliminate that, to have a plan at every single different place that we're at, whether it's a Boys and Girls Club or something else. But again, in that place, we need to make the decision that we're going to like love the people who are there and we're going to meet their needs. And so if you're just in a situation like where you're serving and it's a little out of your comfort zone, it's such a great time to grow when you're in that place and to say like, we're going to do whatever you need. We're going to go ahead and jump to number 6. There's 2 teams at a camp, and there's disagreements about which team is leading right on day 1. How would you guys handle this as teams? Talk about it with your teams, because this happened before a fair amount. What would you guys do to interact with the other camp and figure that out? Yeah. Yeah, talk about it, right? Good. Other ideas of what to do if 2 teams are not on the same page? Yeah. Let the other team go first? Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm telling both of you guys to engage, right? So if you both like, we got it, then there'd be a problem. But if there's 2 teams there, I'd be okay if one team took ownership for that day. Yes, sir. Whoever showed up first come, first serve? Yeah, I like it. Yes, sir, one more. What's that? Rock, paper, scissors, yeah. That'll get the job done too. I like it, Ty. Yeah, so you can do some work on the front end so this doesn't happen by like talking. The best thing we've seen is when each team has a like lead day. So if there's 2 teams at a camp, say like, hey, we got day 1, you got day 2, we got day 3, you got day 4, is typically the smoothest, and then the second team then just goes and helps at the camp that day. So like they're not going to do lead the song or lead the skit or lead the gospel or that kind of thing, but they're going to be there and be creating a great camp experience. That's typically the best, so we can get it out in front of that. I've got 2 more, and then I want to invite our panel up. I'm going to jump to number 10 is the last one. A parent shows up visibly frustrated and annoyed to be dropping their kids off at camp. A parent shows up, got out of the car, they're yelling, maybe you heard them cuss, they did something like that, and they're just like not in a good mood. What do you do when a parent shows up not in a good mood? Thanks, Steve. All right, what would you do with a frustrated parent? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And she said introduce yourself so that the parent knows who's taking care of the child. For sure, right here. Yes. Yes. Come play a game, try to get him like involved right away. Yep, here. Cool. Couple more. Yes. Yep, I like that a lot. I'll take one more right here. One more time? Yeah, value the kid so that he has a great time, a great experience. Yeah. I think that's great. I think those are all good ways to engage. I think right off the bat, like it can be intimidating. Be like, it's intimidating enough to go say, hey, here's who I am. It's even more when they're like visibly like just frustrated. You don't know what happened. I think going introducing yourself is great. I think utilizing your host home is great and say, hey, it looks like they're having a tough day. Get them on board. I think that's really important. The sum of all of this is that if there's something where there's an unknown and you have the decision to go and engage, and typically that can just mean a conversation. Like most of those were like, I'd talk to them. Like that can be most of the time what engaging means and not a whole lot more. We will create great camp experiences if we go and engage rather than pull back. And in life, when we run into those unknown, if we engage the unknown, we have the power to create these moments that will be defining moments for us for the rest of our life. There's this one thing that I would just, we're not going to do this right now, but I would like 10 out of 10 recommend it because I did it from the Power of Moments. And it's just super powerful. He talks about telling someone you're grateful for a defining moment in your life. So when I said earlier, think about the people in your life who made defining moments, and who was there at that point in time, especially if it's someone who made an investment in you. Chip Heath, the author, said this. He said, close your eyes, call up the face of someone still alive who years ago did something or said something that changed your life for the better. Someone who you never properly thanked, someone you could meet face to face next week. He said, you got that face. Your task is to write a letter of gratitude to this individual and deliver it in person. The letter should be concrete and in about 300 words. Be specific about what he or she did for you and how it affected your life. Let her know what you're doing now, and mention how often you remember what he or she did. This is super powerful. If you think about someone that you like, dang, like that changed my life, and they might not even know it. Kendall and I were talking about this, and she had a freshman counselor that came up and like welcomed her as she was like exploring like which organization to be a part of freshman year of college. She went on to be a part of it for 3 years, and it was absolutely crazy, but like, it changed her entire experience. But it was like one conversation where someone smiled and like made her feel incredibly welcomed, and she remembers that. And she reached out, and actually the person who did it didn't remember it, but she was like so incredibly thankful that she reached out and did this. I would just like 10 out of 10 recommend thinking through saying, telling someone you're grateful for them. But that's not the last thing I want to finish on. I do want to finish on not hearing from me. I'm not the expert on camps, but you guys are. So I want to invite up a couple of students for our student panel. So if y'all could come up here, Klein, Taylor, Grant, Jackson, and Nye. Y'all give it up for them as they come up here. These are a few of our returning captains. And Taylor's going first. So I have a couple of just, kind of situation scenarios that I want them to talk through and think through with you guys. But before we do that, I would love if you could just introduce yourself, and then I asked them just to talk about like a hard thing that has happened to them at camp. So like something tough along the lines of something we just had to deal with. It's like that they actually dealt with, and just kind of how they dealt with it. So we'll start with Taylor.
Sweet. Okay, I'm Taylor, and at a camp a couple years ago, my freshman year, it was the first day, and I probably had like 8 kids at that camp, and I had another like partner team like helping out. And probably like 10 minutes into Camp 75, there was like a 14-year-old boy on a bike like dropping off his little brother at camp. And I went up and talked to him, and I was like, hi, like, I'm so happy you're here. And I like introduced myself and asked their names. And the 14-year-old on the bike was like, yeah, I'm just dropping him off. I was like, oh, well, you're welcome to stay. Like, I know you're kind of older for this, but like, you're welcome to just like help out and like hang out if you want to. And he goes, yeah, no, I'm good. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So then his brother went and like was really into it and was really fun. But the kid on the bike kept like riding back and forth in front of the house and like making a lot of noise and was like playing music on his phone and like yelling at his brother from like across the street. It was just very distracting, and like my team didn't know what to do, and the kids were like looking back and like weren't paying attention to the story and everything. It was just weird. So then I kind of just ignored it and I was like, oh, okay. Well, so then the second day he came back and he dropped off his brother, and I asked again if he wanted to like come and like hang out with us, and he's like, yeah, no, this looks really weird. I was like, oh, okay, well, thanks anyway. And then he still like rode back and down the street and was like being distracting. So then finally the second day I went up and I was like, hi, I know you really don't want to like come and sit with us, but like I'd love if you did. And he was like, oh, okay, like I guess I'll come try. So then he came and like sat in the very back like with his brother and ended up like really enjoying it. And like we invited him to like bench warm with us, and then he just couldn't because he had basketball camp during the day. But it was really weird and awkward in the very beginning, like when he was being distracting, but then it actually ended up being really good. But yeah, that was probably one of the hardest things, just because like I didn't know how to react in the moment. But
That's cool. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Grant. Good job, Taylor. The hardest thing that I've ever had to do, I said Grant, but they were clapping for me. It was for Taylor. The hardest thing that I've ever had to like go through at camp is probably, it was my first year as a captain a few years back, and it was my first year, and I like was so ready. I went to bed. It was the night before camp started, and I woke up the next morning. I guess it was 2 a.m. I woke up at 2 a.m. just vomiting everywhere. First year as a captain, and I couldn't go to camp, and I missed the first 2 days. And I was like, I'll try to go to third. Woke up on the third day, still as sick as the first, and I missed the entire week of Camp 75. My team went with no captain the whole week, but they did it, and they had a bunch of fun, and they stuck through it. They did it because they're great.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it was really cool that year. Jordan had the same experience. His his junior year of high school or something, that he got super sick. He actually missed the entire week of Camp 75 as a captain. Both times that I've seen that, like the teams just like totally owned it and stepped up and just like, we're like, okay, it's my time to shine. And I just think that's great. Like there's a day that like captain is sick or not feeling well or something happens, like you guys are totally good on your own. Like you guys got it, go lead and all that kind of stuff. Again, not that, I hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, just know you guys got it. That's cool. Nye?
Yes. Naomi, hello. Love you, Reason. Anyway, my hardest experience, I think, was also my first year as a captain, and I had a really amazing team that year. Yeah, Bailey, there you go. But we actually had a community outreach Boys and Girls Club, which is essentially a bunch of kids who are in one club. They have really difficult home lives or really difficult situations going on. And when we showed up, it was us and 4 other teams, but there were like easily 300 kids there, and we alone had like 100 kids just with our team with 6 people. It was a really difficult situation because all the kids were cussing us out, were screaming everywhere, and we were like, you know what, this is great. So actually, my team, they're amazing. They connected with kids, like they kept walking around, talking to different kids, learning names. There were 100 kids there, and we actually got them to sit down, had a great camp, and even though like it was difficult every single day because kids kept showing up, we actually had more teams show up. But it was just like, there are so many kids there, and having to engage them all and being with all of them was insane. But it's possible with 6 people. So yeah, I think that was, yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you.
My name is Klein, and the hardest situation that I have had as a captain so far was a couple of years back. The week before Camp 75, we figured out that we were sharing our camp with another team, and we only had one camp that year because we were part of Extreme, so we had one morning camp, and we were sharing it with another team. And so I reached out like the week before, and I was talking with the captain, and we split up like all the roles. And so my team wasn't doing most of day 1, and so since we didn't have another camp, there was no reason for them to like practice like the skit and the gospel and stuff because we weren't responsible for that. And so we show up to our first camp the first day, and we show up like a couple minutes early, and we wait in the car because we're waiting for the other team to get there, and they didn't show up. And so we were kind of freaking out. We get out of the car, I call the captain, and they were like, oh yeah, we got our camp moved like last minute. And so we didn't realize that we were no longer sharing this camp with that team. And so we were stuck at this camp, and no one on my team was prepared for the parts because I was like, hey, they're gonna do those parts. So it ended up being fine. We just needed to kind of look at our binders really fast before we started camp. But definitely look at your parts even if you're sharing with the team in case they don't show up.
For sure. My name's Jackson, and I think probably the hardest experience I've had to deal with at a camp was my first year at camp, and one of my teammates was actually sharing the gospel, and we were all sitting down, we were like listening, having a good time, and she got to the part where like she was saying like if you're part of God's, and if you believe that like what Jesus did for you, and you believe in that, then you get to be a part of God's family forever. And like she was like, isn't that awesome? And all the kids were like, yeah. And I was like, all right, this is going good. And then there was this one kid in the crowd that said, and if you don't, you're going to hell. And we all just sat there, and I was like, I mean, I don't really know what to do. Even the person that was doing the gospel just sat there with her like jaw to the floor, and she was just like, and we were like, you know what, how about we just talk about that? We just told the kid like, hey, how about we just talk about that afterwards? And if any of those like situations happen where they just say random things, kids have like a mind of their own, and they'll just say what they're thinking at that moment. If that happens, just say like, hey, how about we just talk about that after we're done with this or before we play the game? So you're not like addressing it in front of the whole group and make them like feel embarrassed or something like that. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. So I wanted you guys to hear from that on just kind of their original like hard story. I'm just gonna ask a question or two, and then we'll head out to lunch. I think this is one not to say from your like past teams that you've experienced, because I want you to call out, have to call out anyone who's on your team. So just assume, hypothetically speaking, you're at a camp, and 2 people on your team or 3 people on your team or someone on the other team are like just like not engaged with the kids, and they're like kind of on their own, off on their own. Like, what would you do? Like, what's the best thing you could do to handle that as a captain? Anyone can start. We'll just had a couple of y'all answer that.
Okay, so I think I've had this happen, but I won't say. Whatever. So it's really important to like not let the kids like see that, I guess. And so like when that did happen, I was sharing with a partner team, and me and the other captain went and like we started a new game, and then we started a new song like on the other side of the yard, or like kind of away. And then once they were engaged in a game, and once they were like kind of distracted and really into it, then like the captain of their team like went and like talked to them, and it was like, hi, like come on over here, we'd love if you would like lead the next song, or we'd love if you would help in like this way. And so I think like giving someone like a task to do, not in like a mean way and be like, okay, like this is what you're gonna do because you were like weren't engaged before, but I think like getting the kids like away from the situation so they're not like staring at the captains and being like, what are they doing? I think that's really helpful at first, and then just going to them and being like, hi, like I'd so love if you would just like do the next game, or if you would like do your skit now, or like something like that, and just like not like getting on to them, but just like encouraging them through it and knowing that like they can do it. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, something to add? Anyone want to add something to that?
I would say definitely don't ignore it. It's more awkward for like the parents and the kids at your camp if there's like 3 high school or middle school students just kind of sitting on their phones in the garage or like on the side or something. A lot of times this has happened to me before, and I would say like we like to do like maybe like a game or song, kind of like Taylor said, that involves everyone. So it's like you're not yelling at them, you're not really pointing them out, but I'm just like, hey team, remember we're gonna do this song next. I need everyone up here to come help me. And then that's not just like, hey Ted, you need to come over here and help me and get off your phone. But it's like, hey, I need my team up here. We're going to lead you guys in a song. And so it's not so like awkward, like you're just going to them and they don't feel called out or awkward, but they're going to come up now, and hopefully if they're, doing good, hopefully they'll come up and help. If not, then I think what Taylor said is great. Like maybe draw the attention away from them and then have a one-on-one conversation with them.
I got something. Sometimes like whenever you may see people on your team that like aren't engaging with kids, it's not because like they don't like want to engage with them. It's just because maybe they're like not as good as engaging with them. Like some of us in here, like we love kids, we love hanging out with kids. There's also some of us in here that don't really like kids, and like that's completely okay. Like we're all across the spectrum. But one thing that I like to encourage is just like find your one. Like, find your one kid that like you can engage with, that like you can connect with. Not saying like don't ignore all the other kids, but like what really like helps for me is like on the first day or second day, like you can find a kid that just like sticks out, or like, hey, that kid's pretty cool, and you like get to know them and get to like talk to them and get to know their name, so that like they feel special too. So they're connecting with the kid, and they're just not like connecting with just the team member, because then what happens is they see the other kids see you connecting with that kid, and they want to connect with you too. So they'll come to you, and you don't even have to come to them, which is a pretty cool thing about it.
Yeah, it's good. The reason I asked that question to everybody is like I'm pretty big on this. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like, everybody in here has the permission to get everybody back on track. It's not like a captain thing. So like if you and a couple people and like captain's doing a song and a couple people like they went off into their thing, like someone else on your team, feel free to like re-engage them. It is so important for everybody to be on the same page. It's 75 minutes, y'all. Like it's not a long time to go and to engage them. The last thing I have is, have any of you guys, I could ask this before time, done a community engagement? Like not a camp?
I did extreme.
You did extreme, YMCA. Have you done a community engagement? Could you just talk about like that experience and like what you got out of it, what it was like for your team?
Okay, my first community engagement was the Boys and Girls Club, which again was like really difficult at first, mostly because the kids like, do their thing, and that's okay. But so yeah, like I said, like it was the hardest part was really like getting them to pay attention, because even when we were sharing like the skits or the gospel, they were like saying random things that were interesting. You know how kids are. And it was just kind of having, I think my team, what worked really well was having my team sitting in the crowd with them. And that way those kids that like are the ones that tend to talk more, they're like, okay, hey, like let's save that for like after, we're gonna play games in a second, don't you worry, like we're gonna finish the story real quick. So having your team in the crowd is something that always helps, even when you don't have that many kids at a camp. Just having teams participate, even with the story, like then it gets kids to participate and actually want to listen, because they look up to you guys. You guys are teenagers, like older than them, they look up to y'all. My second community engagement was last year, and I was shared that with Lauren Montgomery's team, yeah. And when we showed up, there was no one there. So it was interesting, because we were at a park, and we were like, it was raining, it was just rough. And then we see like a van pull up, and one kid comes out, just one kid comes out of the van. But he was the coolest kid ever. He was doing his like Michael Jackson impersonation. We were like, go off. And there were like 14 of us there, because our teams were pretty big, but we just like loved on that kid. We hyped him up. We did the camp as planned and just pretended like our teams were kids too. And he had the best time ever. And we ended up actually, it was at a park, like I said, so we ended up finding kids in the days where it was sunnier, and they ended up coming, and by the end of it, I think we had like 10 kids. So, and that was community engagement for a specific place, but they only brought one kid that day, because all the other kids got in trouble.
Nice.
But I would just say, like, with community engagement, some of the kids, like, they do come from, like, a difficult home life, difficult past, and it's just, like, connecting with them on that level, making them feel so loved, because sometimes they don't get that from home. And it's just make sure, like, your team is with that kid. Like, if your team is talking to each other, like, of course, we want to be with each other. We get to become friends, but it's just, like, we need to focus on those kids that are there, because this is a time where they get to relax and have fun. And just, I would just say that with that, it's amazing. It's my favorite experience has been doing community engagement. It's just make sure you love on that kid and be just engaged. Like, if you're engaged, if you're loud and excited, they will be too. So, yeah.
Cool. That's great. Those community engagements, guys, whether it's the Boys and Girls Club or you're going to YMCA or you're doing something completely unrelated to camp, are so valuable to serve people in ways like that. And those are something to be excited about, like whether it's morning, night camp, whatever it is, it's something to get really excited about.